Zektar stood on the bridge of the Krellian warship, looking down at the green planet below. His forearms moved across the control panels as he prepared for what should be an easy victory. The planet was called Kepler 442b by the humans who lived there. It was a farming world with only a few small cities. Intelligence reports said there were maybe 50,000 humans living on the surface. The humans were new to space travel. They had only left their home planet about 200 years ago. That was nothing compared to the Krellian Empire, which had been conquering worlds for over 10,000 years. Zektar had been a soldier for 300 years himself. He had fought in dozens of battles against dozens of different species. None of them had given the Empire much trouble. The briefing had been simple. Humans were emotional creatures who made decisions based on feelings instead of logic. They were weak physically compared to most species. Their technology was basic. Their military tactics were primitive. The intelligence division expected the 47th strike battalion to take the planet in less than 1 day. Zektar felt confident as he climbed into his drop pod with his squad. He had 12 soldiers under his command, all experienced veterans. Each Krellian soldier was worth at least 5 enemy fighters in normal combat. Against humans, the ratio would probably be even better. The drop pods launched from the ship and fell toward the planet like metal raindrops. Zektar watched the surface grow larger through his viewport. He could see the human settlement they were supposed to capture. It looked quiet and peaceful. There were farm fields all around it, with crops growing in neat rows. A few small buildings sat in the center. It reminded him of the farming settlements on his own home world. The pods hit the ground with loud crashes. Zektar kicked open his pod door and stepped out onto the alien soil. The air smelled different here, sweeter somehow. His soldiers emerged from their own pods and formed up around him. They moved quickly toward the human settlement. Weapons ready. That was when they saw the first humans. There were about 20 of them standing near the buildings. They wore simple military uniforms that looked almost like work clothes. Their weapons were basic projectile rifles that fired metal bullets instead of energy beams. When they saw the Krellian soldiers approaching, they did exactly what the intelligence reports predicted they would do. They panicked. The humans started shouting at each other in their strange language. Several of them dropped their weapons and ran. Others fired a few wild shots that went nowhere near the Krellian soldiers, then turned and fled as well. Within minutes, most of the human defenders had scattered into the surrounding farm fields, but not all of them. 3 human soldiers stayed behind. 2 of them appeared to be wounded. One was lying on the ground, holding his leg and crying out in pain. Another was sitting against a building wall with blood on his arm. The third human, who seemed to be their leader, was trying to help the wounded ones. Zektar ordered his squad to advance carefully. Even panicking humans might have set traps or left behind explosive devices. As they got closer, he could see the humans more clearly. They were smaller than Krellians, with only 2 arms and soft skin. The one helping the wounded appeared to be a female. She had short brown hair and determined eyes that reminded Zektar uncomfortably of a cornered predator. The female human looked up as the Krellian soldiers approached. She said something in her language that Zektar asked translator. Converted to, "Please, my soldiers are badly hurt. Let me treat their wounds." Zektar studied the scene. His training told him this could be a trap, but the humans looked genuinely desperate. The wounded ones were definitely in pain. Blood was real, not fake. The female's hands shook as she tried to bandage the leg wound. One of his soldiers, Krelax, pointed to some equipment the fleeing humans had left behind. There were communication devices, medical supplies, and what looked like detailed maps of the local area. It was exactly the kind of intelligence data that would help them complete their mission quickly. Zektar made a decision. He ordered half his squad to secure the abandoned equipment while the others kept watch on the humans. The female continued working on her wounded soldiers. She moved efficiently, like someone with medical training. She kept talking to the injured humans in a soft voice, probably trying to keep them calm. After a few minutes, one of Zektar's soldiers reported that the area was secure. The equipment seemed genuine and undamaged. The maps would be very useful. for tracking down the humans who had fled. Zektar decided to question the female human before moving on. He approached her slowly, keeping his weapon lowered but ready. Up close, he could see that she was very young, probably barely an adult, by human standards. Her uniform had a small badge that his translator identified as indicating the rank of commander. That seemed impossible. How could such a young, small creature be in charge of other soldiers? "You are the leader of these humans?" Zektar asked. Through his translator, the female looked up at him. Her eyes were brown and showed no fear, only concern for her wounded soldiers. "Yes, Commander Jake Murphy of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit, these are my people." Zektar paused. The name and voice belonged to a female, but she had said Jake, which his cultural database indicated was typically a male human name. Human naming customs were clearly more confusing than the briefings had suggested. Where did the other humans go? He demanded. Commander Murphy shrugged. They ran. Can't blame them. Most of these people are farmers, not soldiers. They've never seen real combat before. This matched what Zektar expected. Civilians pressed into military service would naturally flee when faced with professional soldiers. He felt a moment of sympathy for the young commander. She had been left behind with wounded soldiers while her troops abandoned her. "We will treat your wounded properly," Zektar said. It was standard Krellian practice to show mercy to defeated enemies, especially when they posed no threat. "Then you will guide us to find the others." Commander Murphy nodded gratefully. "Thank you. My soldiers need medical attention soon or they might die." Zektar ordered his medic to help with the wounded humans while the rest of his squad prepared to pursue the fleeing defenders. The maps the humans had left behind showed several possible hiding places in the surrounding area. There were caves in the hills and dense forest that could conceal small groups. As his soldiers worked, Zektar noticed something odd. The human commander kept checking a small device on her wrist. When he asked about it, she said it was just a medical monitor to track her soldiers' vital signs. That seemed reasonable enough. The Krellian medic quickly stabilized the wounded humans. Their injuries were real but not life-threatening with proper treatment. Zektar was impressed by how quietly they endured pain. Perhaps humans were tougher than the reports suggested. With the wounded secured, Zektar prepared to move out. According to the maps, there was a network of caves about 2 kilometers north where the fleeing humans might have taken shelter. If his squad moved quickly, they could reach the area before the humans had time to organize any serious defense. Commander Murphy offered to guide them, pointing out the best routes on the map. She seemed eager to cooperate, probably hoping to protect her remaining soldiers by helping the Krellians find them quickly and peacefully. As they left the settlement, Zektar felt confident about how the mission was progressing. The initial contact had gone exactly as predicted. The humans had shown themselves to be emotional, poorly organized, and unable to cope with professional military pressure. Within a few hours, his squad would have rounded up all the remaining defenders and the planet would be under Krellian control. He had no idea that Commander Jake Murphy had just led him into the most sophisticated trap he would ever encounter. The first sign something was wrong came 30 minutes later, when they were deep in the forest following a trail the human commander had recommended. Zektar's communication officer reported that they were having trouble maintaining contact with the ship. The signal kept cutting in and out as if something was interfering with their transmissions. Then the shooting started. Zektar barely escaped from Kepler 442b with his life. Half his squad was dead, and the rest were wounded. Commander Jake Murphy had played them perfectly, leading them into an ambush that cost the Krellian Empire an entire battalion. The humans had fought like nothing Zektar had ever seen before. 3 months later, he found himself on another world, facing humans again. Titan V was not a farming planet. It was a fortress moon orbiting a gas giant in the outer rim of human space. The moon was covered with cities built from metal and concrete. Tall buildings reached toward the dark sky like giant fingers. The humans had turned the entire moon into one massive military base. The Krellian Empire wanted Titan 7. Because it controlled shipping routes to 6 different star systems. Take the moon, and human trade in the entire sector would collapse. The military planners expected heavy fighting, but they believed Krellian technology and tactics would win in the end. Zector was part of the ground assault force. He had been promoted after surviving Kepler 442b, even though his mission there had failed. The Empire needed experienced soldiers who understood how humans fought. What he had learned on that farming world was that humans did not follow normal rules of warfare. The attack on Titan 7 began with orbital bombardment. Krellian warships rained energy beams down on the moon's surface for 6 hours. Military doctrine said this would destroy most enemy defenses and demoralize the survivors. When the bombardment ended, the ground assault would face only scattered resistance. The first wave of drop pods launched at dawn. Zector was in the second wave, scheduled to land 30 minutes after the initial assault. He watched through his pod's viewport as the first pods descended toward the moon's surface. Everything looked normal until they reached the lower atmosphere. That was when the humans opened fire. Weapons came out of buildings that were supposed to be destroyed. Gun positions that should have been blown apart by the bombardment started shooting at the drop pods. Energy shields that the orbital scans had missed suddenly appeared around key defensive positions. Zector watched in horror as dozens of drop pods were shot down before they could reach the ground. The humans had hidden their real defenses and let the Krellians waste their bombardment on fake targets. His own pod made it to the surface, but barely. The landing was rough, and 2 of his soldiers were injured when their pods crashed into a building. As soon as Zector stepped outside, he could hear the sounds of fighting echoing through the city streets. The plan had been simple. Land in the industrial district, secure a perimeter, then advance toward the government buildings in the city center. The streets were supposed to be clear after the bombardment. Instead, humans were everywhere. They did not fight like any enemy Zector had encountered before. Normal military doctrine called for establishing defensive positions and engaging the enemy at long range. Energy weapons were most effective at distances of several hundred meters. Krellian soldiers were trained to find cover, set up overlapping fields of fire, and wear down enemy forces through superior firepower. The humans ignored all of that. A group of human soldiers came running around a corner, firing primitive projectile weapons as they charged straight toward Zector's position. Any sane enemy would have taken cover and tried to pin down the Krellians from a distance. These humans just kept coming, shooting and shouting as they ran directly into the kill zone. Zector's squad opened fire with their energy rifles. The beams cut down the first few humans, but the rest kept charging. One human soldier took a direct hit to the chest, but somehow stayed on his feet long enough to throw a small explosive device before collapsing. The explosion damaged 2 Krellian soldiers and forced the squad to retreat. That was Zector's first lesson about human close-quarters combat. They were willing to die to hurt their enemies. The fighting moved deeper into the city. Every building seemed to contain human soldiers. They would wait until Krellian forces were close, then attack from windows, doorways, and rooftops. The humans used their knowledge of the city against the invaders. They knew which buildings connected to each other through underground tunnels. They knew which streets were dead ends and which ones led to ambush points. Zector's squad was assigned to capture a communications center in the middle of the city. Intelligence said it was defended by maybe 20 human soldiers. When they arrived, they found over 100 humans waiting for them. The building was 5 stories tall with thick concrete walls. Normal tactics called for surrounding the building and forcing the defenders to surrender. But Colonel Ryan Blake, the human commander, had other ideas. Instead of staying inside the building, Blake led his soldiers outside to fight in the streets. They came pouring out of doors and windows like angry insects from a disturbed nest. Some carried standard military rifles. Others had weapons that looked like they were made from construction tools and spare parts. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Zector's 300 years of military experience. A human soldier named Sergeant Lisa Carter ran straight at a Krellian heavy weapons team. She was carrying 2 primitive projectile pistols and screaming something that the translator could not convert properly. The Krellians shot her twice, but she kept coming. When she reached their position, she killed both soldiers with her pistols. Before falling down from her wounds, another human, Private Ben Rodriguez, had his arm broken by a Krellian energy blast. Instead of retreating for medical treatment, he used the broken arm as a distraction. While a Krellian soldier was staring at the obvious injury, Rodriguez pulled out a small explosive device with his good hand. He grabbed the enemy soldier and detonated the bomb, killing them both. Zektar could not understand this kind of fighting. Krellian soldiers were trained to preserve their lives while completing their missions. They used tactics that minimized casualties and maximized effectiveness. These humans seemed to think that dying while fighting was somehow a good thing. The worst part was that the human tactics worked. Despite having superior weapons and training, the Krellian forces found themselves being pushed back street by street. The humans fought for every building, every room, every corner. They turned office buildings into fortresses and shopping centers into death traps. When the humans ran out of ammunition, they fought with knives. When they ran out of knives, they fought with rocks and pieces of broken metal. When they ran out of weapons entirely, they fought with their bare hands. Zektar watched a human female named Lieutenant Amy Torres continue fighting even after being shot 3 times. She used her own blood to make the floor slippery, causing 2 Krellian soldiers to fall down. Then she attacked them with a broken piece of glass before finally collapsing the communication center. Battle lasted for 14 hours. By the end, the building was completely destroyed and both sides had taken heavy casualties, but the humans had achieved their goal. They had delayed the Krellian advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive from other parts of the moon. As Zektar retreated with the survivors of his squad, he tried to understand what he had witnessed. The humans had fought like cornered animals, but with the intelligence and planning of trained soldiers. They combined primitive brutality with sophisticated tactics in ways that seemed impossible. The medical officer who treated his wounds later told him something that made the experience even more disturbing. The human prisoners they had captured were not special forces or elite troops. They were ordinary soldiers, no different from thousands of others throughout human space, according to the prisoners. The fighting on Titan VII was considered normal by human standards. They called it urban warfare, and every human soldier was trained to fight this way from the beginning of their military service. Zektar realized that what he had thought was desperate madness was actually standard human military doctrine. They had turned close-quarters combat into a science, developing techniques that seemed insane but were terrifyingly effective. The battle for Titan VII continued for 6 more weeks. Every building had to be taken by force. Every street became a battlefield. The humans never retreated unless they were physically forced to do so, and even then they made the Krellians pay for every meter of ground. When the moon finally fell to the Empire, over half the Krellian invasion force was dead or wounded. The humans had lost as well, but they had made victory so expensive that the Empire began to question whether fighting them was worth the cost. Zektar spent the rest of his military career trying to forget what he had seen in those city streets. But the memory stayed with him. The image of humans charging directly into energy weapon fire, fighting with broken bones and fatal wounds, dying with their enemies' blood on their hands. He had learned something on Titan VII that would change how he thought about warfare forever. Combat was not just about superior technology or better tactics. Sometimes it was about which side was willing to pay the highest price for victory, and humans, he had discovered, were willing to pay any price at all. After the nightmare of Titan VII, Zektar hoped he would never face humans in combat again. He had requested a transfer to the intelligence division, thinking that analyzing data would be safer than fighting on the front lines. The Empire granted his request, probably because they needed officers who understood how humans fought. His new assignment brought him to New Geneva Station, a massive space facility orbiting a dead planet in neutral territory. The station had been built by several different species working together for trade and diplomacy. When the war started, both sides wanted to control it because of its strategic location. The humans had occupied the station first, but they were outnumbered 10 to 1. The Krellian Empire surrounded the facility with warships and demanded surrender. Military analysts predicted the siege would last maybe 2 weeks before the humans gave up. They were wrong about everything. Zektar arrived at the command ship 3 days after the siege began. As an intelligence officer, his job was to analyze human behavior and predict their actions. He thought this would be easier than his previous assignments because the humans were trapped with nowhere to run, the first sign that something was different came during his initial briefing. Admiral Kreltos, the fleet commander, looked tired and stressed. The admiral had been fighting wars for over 400 years, but Zektar had never seen him look worried before. The humans are not behaving. Normally, Admiral Kreltos explained, they should be trying to conserve resources and prepare for a long siege. Instead, they are doing something else entirely. Zektar asked what the humans were doing that was so concerning. They are talking to us, the admiral replied. That seemed harmless enough. Enemy forces often tried to negotiate during sieges. Usually, they asked for safe passage or discussed surrender terms. Zektar expected the human communications to follow the same pattern. He was completely unprepared. For what the humans were actually doing, the station commander was a human female named Captain Nicole Foster. She had been sending messages to the Krellian fleet every few hours since the siege began. But these were not normal military communications. They were something much worse. The first message Zektar heard was being broadcast on an open channel that all Krellian ships could receive. Captain Foster spoke in perfect Krellian language with no translator needed. Her accent was flawless, like someone who had grown up speaking the language. "Good morning, brave soldiers of the Krellian Empire," her voice said through the communication system. "I hope you slept well last night. I know some of you have been having trouble sleeping lately. War can be very stressful, especially when you're far from home." Zektar frowned. This was not how enemy commanders usually spoke. There was something about her tone that made him uncomfortable, though he could not explain why. Captain Foster continued talking. "I want you to know that we understand how difficult this must be for you. Being stuck in space for months, fighting people you have never met, following orders from leaders who will never remember your names. It must be lonely." The message went on for 10 more minutes. Captain Foster talked about homesickness, about missing family members, about the fear that comes with combat. She spoke like someone who genuinely cared about the Krellian soldiers. But there was something wrong with every word she said. Admiral Kreltos turned off the communication system and looked at Zektar. She has been doing this every day, different topics, but always the same tone. Friendly and understanding, but somehow threatening at the same time. Zektar asked if anyone had responded to the messages. "That is the problem," the admiral said. "Several ship commanders have tried to talk back to her. Every time they do, she knows things she should not know." The admiral showed Zektar recordings of previous conversations. When Captain Verlag from the heavy cruiser destroyer of worlds had told Captain Foster to stop her psychological games, she had responded by asking about his daughter's wedding that was scheduled to happen in 3 months. When Commander Zelmar had threatened to destroy the station, Foster had mentioned that his home village was having a harvest festival and asked if he was sad to miss it. The humans knew personal details about Krellian officers that should have been impossible to obtain. They knew about family events, home addresses, personal hobbies, and private fears. Somehow, Captain Foster and her intelligence unit had gathered information about individual soldiers that existed only in private records on Krellian homeworlds. But the messages were just the beginning. On the 4th day of the siege, Krellian patrol ships started finding strange objects floating in space near the station. The first one looked like a small metal container with Krellian writing on the outside. When the patrol ship brought it aboard, they found photographs inside. The photographs showed Krellian soldiers with their families. Wedding pictures, birthday celebrations, children playing in gardens. All of them were recent, taken after the war had started. Some showed family members holding signs with messages written in Krellian script. The messages said things like, "Come home soon, and we miss you, and the war is not worth dying for." Zektar examined the photographs carefully. They were genuine, not fake or altered. Somehow, human agents had traveled to Krellian worlds and taken pictures of soldiers' families. Even more disturbing, the family members in the pictures seemed to be cooperating willingly, as if they had been convinced to participate in the psychological operation. More containers appeared over the following days. Some contained personal items that had clearly been taken from captured Krellian soldiers. Others held letters written in perfect Krellian script, describing in detail how human forces planned to defeat each ship in the fleet. The letter addressed to Zektar's ship was the most disturbing thing he had ever read. It was written on expensive paper using traditional Krellian calligraphy. The message began by welcoming him by name and rank, then mentioned his service record, his previous assignments, and his experiences on Kepler 442b and Titan 7. The human writer seemed to know every detail of his military career. Then the letter became personal. It mentioned his childhood on the farming colony of Krelter Prime. It described his family's house, his parents' names, and the school he had attended as a young Krellian. It even included details about his favorite foods and the games he had played with his siblings. The final paragraph was what made Zektar's blood turn cold. We know you are tired of fighting, Zektar. We know you have seen things that give you nightmares. We know you want to go home to your family and forget about this war. We can help you do that. We can make all of this stop. All you have to do is convince your fleet commander to surrender. Think about your parents, growing old on their farm. Think about your sister, raising her children. Think about all the Krellian soldiers who will die if this siege continues. You have the power to save them all. Zektar read the letter 3 times before he realized his hands were shaking. The humans had not just gathered information about him. They had studied him, analyzed his personality, and crafted a message designed specifically to break his will to fight. He was not the only one receiving personal attention over the next few days. Every officer in the fleet received similar letters. Each one was different, tailored to the individual recipient's background and psychology. The humans seemed to know which officers had families, which ones were ambitious, which ones were afraid, and which ones had doubts about the war. Captain Foster's daily broadcasts became more sophisticated as well. She started playing recordings of previous battles, including the sounds of Krellian soldiers dying. She played intercepted personal messages from families back home, asking when their loved ones would return from the war. The worst broadcast came on the 10th day of the siege. Captain Foster announced that her intelligence unit had been monitoring Krellian communications for months before the war began. She played recordings of private conversations between fleet officers, including complaints about military leadership and doubts about the Empire's war goals. Then she played something that made Admiral Kreltos turned pale with horror. It was a recording of a conversation between the Admiral and his wife, made in the privacy of his quarters 3 weeks earlier. In the conversation, Admiral Kreltos had expressed serious doubts about the war and worry about the young soldiers under his command. He had said things that could be considered treasonous if reported to the Empire's political leadership. We have been watching you for a very long time, Captain Foster's voice said after the recording ended. We know what you really think about this war. We know what you say when you think no one is listening. We know everything about all of you. The psychological pressure began affecting the entire fleet. Ship commanders reported increased sick calls as soldiers complained of stress-related illnesses. Several officers requested transfers back to homeworlds. 2 junior officers were caught trying to desert by stealing shuttlecraft. Admiral Kreltos called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The Admiral looked like he had aged 10 years in the past week. His normally perfect uniform was wrinkled, and his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. The humans are not trying to win a military victory, he told the assembled officers. They are trying to break our minds. They want us to defeat ourselves. After the disaster at New Geneva Station, Zektar thought the Krellian Empire would learn to avoid fighting humans. The psychological warfare had shaken the entire fleet command. Many officers had requested transfers to fight other species instead. Zektar himself had submitted reports recommending that the Empire negotiate peace with humanity. The High Command ignored all of these suggestions. Instead, they decided to end the human problem once and for all. If individual battles were proving too costly, then the Empire would commit everything to one massive assault. They would gather the largest fleet in Krellian history and crush human resistance completely. The target was Proxima Station, the main shipyard complex in human space. The station was enormous, built around an artificial gravity well that could service hundreds of ships at once. If the Empire destroyed Proxima Station, humanity would lose the ability to build or repair their military vessels. Zektar was assigned to the intelligence staff of the flagship Emperor's Wrath. His job was to analyze human behavior and predict their response to the coming attack. Based on his previous encounters, he expected the humans to use psychological warfare and tactical deception like they had before. He was not prepared for what actually happened. The Krellian fleet that assembled at the jump point was the largest military force in the Empire's history. Over 1,500 warships of all classes, from small patrol boats to massive battleships. The fleet carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Admiral Supreme Velkar, the Empire's greatest military leader, commanded the operation. Personally, intelligence reports indicated that humanity had maybe 200 ships defending Proxima Station. Even if every human vessel was equipped with their most advanced weapons, the odds were overwhelming. The attack was scheduled to last 6 hours at most. When the Krellian fleet jumped into the Proxima system, they found the human defenders waiting. For them, Admiral Susan Martinez commanded the human fleet from her flagship, the UES Liberty. She was an older human female with gray hair and scars on her face from previous battles. Intelligence files said she had been fighting wars for over 30 years, which was impressive for such a short-lived species. Admiral Martinez opened communication channels as soon as the Krellian fleet appeared. Zektar expected her to offer surrender terms or at least try to negotiate. Instead, she did something that shocked every Krellian officer listening. She laughed. "Welcome to Proxima, Admiral Velkar," she said in accented but clear Krellian. "We have been expecting you. I hope you brought enough ships because you are going to need all of them." Admiral Velkar responded with the standard demand for unconditional surrender. He pointed out that his fleet outnumbered the humans 7-1 and that resistance was hopeless. Admiral Martinez laughed again. "Hopeless? That is an interesting word coming from someone whose people have been losing to us for 2 years. But you are right about one thing. This battle will be hopeless. Just not for the people you think." The communication ended, and Admiral Martinez issued orders to her fleet. Instead of forming defensive positions around the station, the human ships began moving toward the Krellian fleet. They were going to attack. Zektar could not believe what he was seeing. Any rational military commander would try to use the stations, defensive systems, and force the attackers to come to them. The humans were giving up their only advantage by moving into open space where the Krellian fleet could use superior numbers effectively. Unless they had a plan that no one could see coming, the battle began with long-range missile exchanges. Both sides launched thousands of projectiles at each other across the vast distances between the fleets. The Krellian advantage in numbers showed immediately. For every human missile that hit its target, 3 or 4 Krellia missiles found human ships, but something was wrong with the human response. Instead of trying to minimize damage and preserve their ships, the human commanders seemed to be deliberately exposing themselves to enemy fire. Ships that could have taken cover behind larger vessels stayed in the open. Captains who could have retreated to safer positions held their ground and kept fighting the human destroyer. UES Defiance took direct hits from 4 different Krellian cruisers. Any normal ship would have been destroyed instantly. Somehow, the Defiance stayed in the fight. Captain Paul Wright kept his damaged vessel firing until its weapon systems finally failed. Even then, he did not retreat. "All ships, this is Captain Wright," his voice came over the communication channels. "Defiance has lost main power and life support. We are switching to emergency systems and continuing the fight. If anyone has a problem with that, they can write a complaint to my commanding officer after the war is over." The Defiance continued, fighting for 6 more hours. The crew sealed themselves into their suits when the atmosphere leaked out. They operated weapons manually when the computer systems failed. They used emergency power cells to keep essential systems running long after the main reactor had shut down. When the ship finally stopped moving, it had destroyed 3 Krellian vessels and damaged 5 others. The pattern repeated throughout. The human fleet. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Crews that should have evacuated stayed at their posts. Captains who should have surrendered found new ways to hurt their enemies. The human cruiser UES Vengeance had its entire front section blown apart by a Krellian battleship. The ship was leaking atmosphere, debris, and bodies into space. Any sane crew would have abandoned ship immediately. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks had other ideas. She sealed off the damaged sections and rerouted power from non-essential systems to the remaining weapons. With half her ship gone and most of her crew dead, she somehow managed to maneuver the Vengeance close enough to a Krellian heavy cruiser to fire at point-blank range. The exchange destroyed both ships, but not before Commander Brooks sent a final message to the fleet. Tell my daughter that her mother died fighting. Tell her that some things are worth any price. Zektar watched the battle from the flagship's command center, trying to understand what he was seeing. The humans were losing. Their ships were being destroyed one by one. Their casualties were enormous. By any rational measure, they should have surrendered hours ago. Instead, they fought harder. Admiral Martinez reorganized her remaining ships into smaller groups that could move faster and hit harder. When she ran out of large vessels, she used small patrol boats to attack Krellian battleships. When those were destroyed, she sent individual fighters on suicide runs against enemy command ships. The human carrier UES Independence launched its entire fighter wing in a coordinated attack on the Krellian flagship. Most of the fighters were shot down before they could reach their target, but 3 managed to get through the defensive fire. They crashed directly into the Emperor's wrath, causing massive damage to the ship's command systems. Admiral Velkar was forced to transfer his flag to another vessel, but the attack had accomplished something more important than tactical damage. It had shown the entire Krellian fleet that the humans would never stop fighting. No matter how hopeless their situation became, the battle that was supposed to last 6 hours continued for 3 days. Every time the Krellian commanders thought they had finally broken human resistance, the remaining ships would regroup and attack again. Human vessels that should have been scrap metal somehow kept functioning. Crews that should have been dead kept finding ways to operate their weapons. On the second day, Admiral Martinez's flagship was surrounded by 6 Krellian battleships. The UES Liberty was damaged beyond repair, with fires burning throughout the ship and most systems offline. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered to save the lives of the remaining crew. Admiral Martinez ordered her ship to ram the nearest Krellian vessel. The collision destroyed both ships instantly, but not before the Admiral sent one final message to her fleet. This is Admiral Martinez. The Liberty is going down, but we are taking these bastards with us. All remaining ships continue the fight. Make them pay for every inch of space. Show them what it means to fight humans. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, so the Krellian fleet heard every word. Zektar saw Admiral Velkar's face go pale as he listened to the transmission. The Supreme Admiral was beginning to understand what kind of enemy he was fighting. The humans did not know how to give up. Even when their fleet was reduced to a handful of damaged ships, they kept attacking. Even when their ammunition was almost gone, they found ways to hurt their enemies. Even when defeat was certain, they made the Krellians pay a terrible price for victory. The final phase of the battle was the most horrifying thing Zektar had ever witnessed. The last dozen human ships were completely surrounded by over 1,000 Krellian vessels. The humans had no chance of escape and no hope of victory. Logic demanded that they surrender to preserve what remained of their crews. Instead, they began ramming operations. One by one, the surviving human ships accelerated toward Hylian vessels and crashed into them at full speed. They turned billion credit warships into kinetic weapons, trading their own lives to destroy their enemies. The human escort carrier UES Yorktown, commanded by Captain Lisa King, managed to take out 2 Krellian destroyers before her ship finally broke apart. The war ended 3 weeks after the Battle of Proxima Station. The Krellian Empire announced a ceasefire and opened peace negotiations with humanity. For the first time in 10,000 years of galactic conquest, the Empire had voluntarily stopped a military campaign before achieving total victory. Zektar was assigned to the peace delegation as a military advisor. His experience fighting humans made him valuable to the negotiation team. The Empire needed officers who understood how human minds worked. Even if that understanding was terrifying, the peace talks were held on a neutral station in empty space, between human and Krellian territory. Both sides sent their best diplomats and military leaders. Zektar expected the negotiations to be difficult, with humans demanding harsh terms after their costly victories. Instead, the humans seemed genuinely interested in ending the war peacefully. The human delegation was led by Ambassador Patricia Wells, an elderly female with white hair and kind eyes. She spoke politely to the Krellian representatives and seemed concerned about preventing future conflicts. Her behavior was so different from the warriors Zektar had fought that he wondered if humans had 2 completely different subspecies. The negotiations proceeded smoothly for the first few days. Both sides agreed to stop military operations and return to pre-war borders. Trade agreements were discussed. Prisoner exchanges were arranged. Everything seemed normal and civilized. Then Zektar met General Kevin Stone. General Stone was part of the human military advisory team. He was a large man with gray hair and scars on his hands from old battles. His uniform was perfectly clean, but somehow he still looked dangerous. When he walked into a room, other humans automatically made space for him. During a break in the formal negotiations, General Stone approached Zektar in the station's observation lounge. The general bought 2 drinks from the automated vendor and offered one to the Krellian officer. "You are the intelligence officer who fought at Kepler 442b, Titan 7 and Proxima Station," General Stone said. It was not a question. Zektar confirmed his identity and asked how the human knew about his service record. General Stone smiled. "We know about all of you. Every Krellian officer who has fought against us is in our files. We study our enemies very carefully." They sat together at a table overlooking the stars. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Zektar asked a question that had been bothering him since the peace talks began. "Why are you here?" He said, "Your people won this war? You defeated our largest fleet and broke our will to fight. You could demand anything you wanted from us. Instead, you are offering reasonable peace terms. I do not understand." General Stone took a drink and looked out at the stars. "You think we won the war? Did you not?" Zektar replied, "Our empire has never stopped a conquest before, completing it. You forced us to negotiate instead of continuing to fight. That is victory." The human general was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder. "Tell me something, Zektar. In all your battles against us, did you ever see humans fight defensively?" Zektar thought about the question. At Kepler 442b, Commander Jake Murphy had led his forces into an aggressive ambush. At Titan 7, Colonel Ryan Blake had brought his troops out of their fortified positions to fight in the streets. At New Geneva Station, Captain Nicole Foster had waged psychological warfare instead of trying to withstand a siege. At Proxima Station, Admiral Susan Martinez had ordered her fleet to attack despite being outnumbered. "No," Zektar admitted. "Your people always attack, even when defending would be smarter." General Stone nodded. "Now tell me this. Do you think what you saw was us fighting at our best?" The question confused Zektar. The humans had fought with incredible skill and determination in every battle. Their tactics had been sophisticated and effective. How could they have fought any better? "I do not understand your meaning," Zektar said. General Stone leaned forward in his chair. "Everything you saw, every battle you fought, every horror you witnessed, that was us holding back." Zektar felt his blood go cold. Holding back? "The rules of war," General Stone explained. Every civilized species follows them. No biological weapons. No targeting civilian populations. No destroying planets. No using certain types of technology that are considered too dangerous. We agreed to follow those rules when we joined the galactic community. Zektar knew about the rules of war. They had been established thousands of years ago to prevent conflicts from becoming too destructive. Every member species of the Galactic Council had signed the agreements. But? Zektar asked, sensing there was more. General Stone smiled. And Zektar suddenly understood why other humans made space for this man. But humans wrote most of those rules, General Stone said quietly. We wrote them because we knew what happened when wars had no limits. We wrote them because we had experience with unlimited warfare. The human general stood up and walked to the observation window. He stared out at the stars as he continued talking. Your people have been conquering worlds for 10,000 years, he said. That sounds impressive until you realize that humans have been fighting wars for 50,000 years. Not conquering other species, fighting each other. Zektar tried to process what he was hearing. You fought wars against your own species for 50,000 years? More or less, General Stone replied. Sometimes the wars were small, just one tribe against another. Sometimes they covered entire continents. Twice we nearly drove ourselves extinct. We got very good at killing. The human turned back to face Zektar. His expression was casual, like he was discussing the weather. Do you want to know the difference between limited war and unlimited war? General Stone asked. Zektar was not sure he wanted to know, but he nodded anyway. Limited war is what you experienced, General Stone explained. Soldiers fighting soldiers, military targets only. Rules about treatment of prisoners, limits on weapons that can be used. The goal is to achieve military victory while minimizing destruction. He paused and looked directly at Zektar. Unlimited war is different. The goal is not military victory. The goal is to make the enemy species extinct. Every human, alien, or thinking creature on the other side must die. Their planets must be uninhabitable. Their culture must be erased. Their very existence must be forgotten. Zektar felt sick. Your people have fought wars like that? We invented wars like that, General Stone said. We called it total war. We developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to destroy entire civilizations. We created viruses that could kill every living thing on a planet. We built bombs that could crack worlds in half. We designed machines that could turn star systems into uninhabitable wastelands. The human sat back down across from Zektar. The worst part is not that we created those weapons, General Stone continued. The worst part is that we used them. Against our own species. We killed billions of our own people because we could not agree on politics or religion or territory. Zektar stared at the human in horror. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something important, General Stone replied. When your empire attacked us, we had a choice. We could fight a limited war using the rules that civilized species follow, or we could fight the way humans used to. Fight each other. He leaned forward again. We chose the limited war. We chose to follow the rules. We chose to hold back and fight you fairly. Do you know why? Zektar shook his head. Because we like you, General Stone said with a smile that was somehow more terrifying than any weapon Zektar had ever seen. We like the Krellian people. We respect your culture. We think you would make good neighbors if we could stop fighting each other. The human stood up to leave. But if you ever force us to choose again, General Stone said quietly, if you ever make us decide between extinction and unlimited war, we will choose differently. And when that happens, you will discover that what you experienced during this conflict was us being nice. General Stone walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. You want to know why we are offering reasonable peace terms? Because we do not want to have to show you what unreasonable looks like. We do not want to have to explain to our children why the Krellian species no longer exists. After the human left, Zektar sat alone in the observation lounge for several hours. He thought about everything General Stone had told him. He thought about the battles he had fought and the humans he had seen die. He thought about what it would mean if those humans had been holding back their true capabilities. The peace negotiations concluded successfully 2 days later. The war officially ended with a treaty that established new boundaries and trade agreements. Both sides agreed to avoid future conflicts and work together on scientific research projects. Zektar returned to the Krellian Empire and submitted his final report on human military capabilities. The report was classified at the highest levels and shared only with the Empire's top military commanders and political leaders. The report's conclusion was simple and absolute. Recommend immediate and permanent peace with humanity. Under no circumstances should the Empire ever again engage in military action against human forces. The humans possess military capabilities that exceed our understanding and show restraint. That should never be tested. What we witnessed during this war was not humanity at war.